get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat. We have a
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big
employee
piece
What
of
is that process that a developer, or let's say
As
a
the
developer
Kubernetes
should go
ecosystem really boomed,
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Admin Office Hours live stream. I am Andrew Sullivan, your host, technical marketing manager with the OpenShift business unit, and I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Johnny Rickard. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I can't complain. It's pollen season here in North Carolina, so if I devolve into a coughing fit, my apologies. What was it last week where I gagged on the stream? So hopefully that doesn't happen again. That wasn't too good. But I don't have allergies, but the pine pollen, especially here in North Carolina, it's so prevalent that it creates this yellow haze. And even if you don't have allergies, it just gets it's bothersome, right? So
Oh yeah.
apologies in advance if if I happen to start coughing or anything like that. I'll just go on mute or try my best to go on mute before I devolve into hacking.
Yeah, when I used to live in Virginia, like Virginia Beach area, the pollen, you could see it sitting on top of the vehicles and everything. I remember that. It was pretty awful.
Yeah, karate chop. It does. It looks like snow, and it piles up snow blows in on the porch and stuff like that. You'll end up with, for lack of a better term, a pollen bank. it's so
Right.
thick and so prevalent. So yeah, I sympathize for anybody and everybody who's been around. For years I lived in Augusta, Georgia. So I guess now it's the Masters is coming up, right? It's the first full week in April. So
Oh yes.
that's always the indicator that it's Masters time, right? Pollen time comes.
That's right. Hopefully Tiger makes an appearance like a real one. That'd be awesome.
It's funny. I lived there. I even went to a practice round once. But I have played golf a few times. I'm terrible at it, and I don't keep up with it too much. I know Tiger was in a terrible accident and all, but
Yeah. I've been playing forever. I mean, since I was 15 years old, and then he's as he was coming up in the early 2000s, so oh, it's Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, he's right around our age, right? So
Yep.
yeah, early 40s, something like that.
Yep.
Anyways, so this week's topic is, and you'll notice we don't have a guest with us because it's just Johnny and I. It's just us. We're going to be talking about a couple of pretty technical things. So one is recovering from a failed control plane node. So this is a question that comes up pretty frequently, right? Which is, hey, I lost a control plane node, or what happens when I lose a control plane node? How do I recover from it? And the documentation for this is deceptively easy, right? It you're kind of reading through it and it's oh, I just have to do these couple of things, and nobody kind of believes it. So what I wanted to do is I created a cluster using the assisted installer. And I'm going to deliberately, destroy one of my control plane nodes, and we're going to see what it's like to recover from that. So the other topic that we wanted to talk about is creating custom Grafana dashboards. So for a while now, you may have noticed that we've been moving away from Grafana for the metrics reporting inside of OpenShift. So particularly as administrators, right, we started off with the Grafana dashboard back in, when 4.1 was released, and starting in, I think it was 4.6 or 4.7, you started to see the metrics dashboards be integrated directly into the admin console. So there's a lot of the same information that was in Grafana, just not in Grafana, right? And directly in the dashboard. And the reason for that largely has to do with permissions. So it turns out that the permission scheme inside of Grafana, there's no easy or good way to integrate it with what's happening in OpenShift. So if Johnny is just a regular old user on my cluster, I can't give him access to just the metrics for the namespaces that he has access to, right? It's all or nothing. So that's one of the big drivers that we've been or behind that move away from Grafana. But that doesn't mean that Grafana and really all of that information that's in Prometheus isn't valuable. So I'm going to show how to deploy Grafana using the Grafana operator. And then we'll look at how to integrate that with the cluster Prometheus as well as Thanos, and how to create some dashboards inside of there. So hopefully, we won't have like a 4-hour stream or anything. Hopefully I can, if everything goes according to plan, I think we'll be done in about an hour and 15 minutes, something like that. Of course, for our audience, you can always ask questions at any point in time about anything that's on your mind. So whether it's related to today's topic or not, feel free to ask us those questions. I think that we have added another streaming platform. So hello to all of the folks at Red Hat TV who are joining us, in addition to YouTube. I think we've got 2 YouTube channels, Red Hat and OpenShift, as well as Twitch. So whatever platform you happen to be on, feel free to use the chat on that platform. The platform we use, Restream, will make sure that all of those chat messages go everywhere. So we'll be able to see those. We'll answer your questions, do our best to help you out. And the worst thing that happens is we don't know the answer. I can't speak for Johnny, but for me, I don't know a lot of things, and I'm not afraid to admit that. And worst thing that happens is we have to go back to the smart folks in engineering, product management, our peers on our teams, stuff like that, and get answers. And we can follow up in next week's stream. We can follow up in the blog post, follow up on social media, etc. So, all right, I'm through with my rambling. Let's talk about some top of mind topics, Johnny.
Yes.
Let me bring up my my notes here. So let's share my screen here. We've got 3 things to go through. Let's see. So the first one, some of you may have noticed that upgrades between 4.8 and 4.9 are blocked. I actually saw somebody on the Kubernetes Slack saying that, I started this update process and I looked at the upgrade graph and it said to go from 4.7 to 8 to 9. I follow this path and I got to 4.8 and now there's nothing there. And just so happened that we happened to block it as they were doing that, as they were going from 7 to 8, so they couldn't get from 8 to 9. So I'll post the link to this particular, or Stephanie, if you can post the link to this particular KCS. So pretty severe bug, if you will, but it has a low probability of being hit. So out of an abundance of caution, effectively they have blocked upgrades between 4.8 and 4.9. And I think it says that somewhere inside of here. Basically to ensure that nobody hits this as they're going through. So please, if you are on 4.8, you are considering going to 4.9, even if you're on 4.9 and considering going to 4.10 in the fast channel, remember 4.9 to 10 upgrades are still in fast, not in stable. Please pay attention to this KCS because it does have potential to impact you. So yeah, that's really all I'll say about that. I would assume, I didn't look to see, I would assume that there's an errata out about blocking updates. I just saw the KCS and decided to pull that up as being our thing here. Our Hope 9, I'd like to ask if there's a convenient tool we could use to set up controlled traffic between nodes in a cluster. Need to debug some NSX latency issues. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Johnny, do you know of anything? I'm trying to think, because I think are you saying you want like a proxy so you can monitor the traffic between the nodes, or?
Yeah, I'm not really sure of any tools. I mean, you could try and get into like the OVS tool and try and use like a IPNet, the IPNet commands within CoreOS to actually monitor the traffic coming across the bridge or that OVS bridge and see if that helps. But as far as controlling traffic to certain nodes so you can watch it, I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'll have to think on that one. I'll ask a couple of the SMEs that I know on the back end if we get a chance. And our Hope 9, feel free to reach out to me, andrew.sullivan@redhat.com, and we'll see if we can follow up and get some information from you. Generate enough traffic so that our VMwares just set up an iPerf between 2 pods on different nodes and let it run indefinitely. They'll love that. Anyways, so yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out, our Hope 9, if we didn't get your question answered. Let's see. So yes, potential etcd data inconsistency issue in 4.9, 4.10 upgrades from here 4.8 to 4.9 are blocked. So please be aware of that. Keep an eye on the errata. It will let you know both that it has been blocked as well as when it is unblocked. All right. What's our next top of mind? The other two are kind of minor, I think. So one, the next OpenShift roadmap session, what we call the What's Next session, will be happening on April 14th. So that will be at, I believe, 10 a.m. Eastern time. Johnny and I will be here along with a whole bunch of other, live stream hosts and all that. So feel free to come by, watch the roadmap presentation, ask questions, just chat with us. We don't mind at all. But we'll be here for that. Since it is on a Thursday, we will be broadcasting our stream on the Wednesday before that, the 13th. So is there any stigma associated with Wednesday the 13th? I don't think so.
No, I don't think. I think we're good.
Yeah. Yeah, they moved this session on us. It was originally going to be on Wednesday, so we didn't have a topic planned. So we'll have to figure out what we're going to do on the 13th.
We're clever. We'll figure something out.
Yeah, we'll figure something out. Let's see. Happy belated birthday to Red Hat. Johnny, was that you that added that one in there?
Yeah. So I think it's March 26th was Red Hat's birthday, and I usually have a ticker or something that shows some of these things, and I caught it over the weekend. I'm like, I can't believe we forgot this last week. So yeah, last week was Red Hat's birthday. We're old. But yeah, so March 26th, I think 1993 is when it started. So happy belated birthday, Red Hat.
Yeah, I when I joined Red Hat was the 25th celebration. So
nice.
Time flies when you're having fun, right?
Indeed.
All right, so I don't want to waste too much time because these are two. I in my tweet I called them mini topics, right? They from an administrator perspective, especially covering from a control plane node, it's not really a mini event, right? We all kind of freak out a little bit, right? It's a big thing. It's a big deal when you lose 1/3 of your control plane, and now you're down to no resiliency. As a old school storage admin, right? RAID 5, right? That's you lose one disk and it's time to start paying attention, right? You sit up in your chair and know that you need to do some work. So
that's right. Back stiffens up, posture's all great. You're focused.
Yeah.
Get it back.
So let's dig in. Let's start taking a look at what we got going on here. So I made a mistake, and when I provisioned my cluster using assisted installer, I provisioned it using my employee account, which is not the account that I use to log into this stream. So I can't actually bring up the console to show you the proof that it was installed with assisted installer. But I promise I installed this using assisted installer. So it is it was deployed in the normal way, right? I have 5 nodes. Actually, what am I doing? So I to keep track of my clusters here, I was showing Johnny beforehand. I created a little banner here. So here's my assisted installer deployed cluster, and over here is my AWS cluster that I'll be using for Grafana in a minute. So it's simple 5-node cluster. If we come over here to compute nodes, you can see I've got my 2 compute nodes here. I've got my control plane nodes down here. Ultimately really straightforward. Because this is assisted installer, I used vSphere. So if we click over here to my vCenter, nope, don't log me out. That was just in the nick of time. You can see I've got my 5 vCenter virtual machines. So remember, assisted installer is basically a non-integrated or an on-prem bare metal deployment. So I did do things like I created DHCP reservations for the IP addresses, as well as for the host names and all that other stuff. So all of the things, right? There's and the VIPs, right? So the ingress and API VIPs. So yeah, everything is in place. All I had to do was click through the assisted installer, let it go and deploy and do its thing. And literally the only thing I have done in this cluster is put in place this banner. I haven't touched anything else, including, you can see I haven't applied the cluster upgrade. So let's find out what happens when we break it, right? So the first thing I want to look at here real quick is so the documentation. So from a documentation perspective, I'm just on the 4.10 documentation. I have browsed down here to backup and restore, and then control plane backup and restore, and we have this replacing an unhealthy etcd member. And one thing that I want to look at here is right now we see that we have 3 members available, right? My etcd cluster is healthy, right? So let's go and break something. So I'm going to actions, and I want to power and power off. Not even going to give it a graceful shutdown.
So are you doing this from the perspective that you don't have any etcd backups? You're just going to go straight?
Yep.
Kill
So
consultant?
I haven't created any etcd backups or anything like that because you don't actually need them to recover, right? So etcd backups are helpful in a couple of different places or reasons, right? So let's say that I lose 2 control plane nodes. Let's say that I'm trying to think. Let's say that something goes horribly wrong and I need to roll back the entire cluster to a point in time, right? etcd backups are useful for basically seeding etcd with the data that's in that backup, which is created at a point in time. In this instance, I still have 2 of my control plane nodes. And if I come back over here and redo this command, it'll take it a couple of minutes for Kubernetes to, remember or figure out that it's dead. But I can do a so cget node. I can force it. So there it says it's not ready. Right. So essentially, it's with 2 control plane nodes still in place, everything is still functional. etcd is still read write. It hasn't gone read only because it has lost quorum or anything like that. So the behavior is effectively when this node comes back, when this node is replaced, the other 2 nodes will populate its etcd with the data that it needs. So I don't have to recover that from a backup. Now, I can, and depending on your cluster, especially your cluster size and your cluster age, and by size, I mean not just number of nodes, but number of pods, number of things, objects in etcd, that may be a good idea. If my etcd database is, tens of gigabytes in size, that's a lot of IO that has to come from these other 2 control plane nodes, as well as being written to this control plane node. That can put a strain on the backend infrastructure that can lead to increased latency, et cetera. So it may be worthwhile for me to, seed or stage some of that data, but it's not required. So just keep that in mind. So let's see if this is, so 2 of 3, right? So it finally realized that, hey, one of my etcd nodes is unhealthy. We can see here that it was marked as not ready. So let's follow the documentation. So you saw I just copied this command, right? Check the status of the etcd members available. We see that only 2 of 3 of them are available, just like we see here. So let's determine the state of the unhealthy member. So we know that the machine is not running. I don't need to check this. So one thing to note, the documentation here is very much in line with or very much assumes that you're using IPI and you have the ability to basically provision virtual machines or nodes, right, machines in your infrastructure on demand. So we're not doing that. We did a bare metal install using assisted installer. So I can kind of ignore these commands about machines, right? Yes, our node is definitely not ready. So let's check the status of that. See, it's declared our control node 00 as being not ready. And we can still see over here in node, it's still listed in not ready status. So we'll scroll down a little bit. We know that etcd is not crash looping. It's just not there. So how do we replace this now unhealthy member? So replacing a member whose machine is not running or not ready. This is the status that we're in. So let's scroll down and follow the documentation. So we're just going to copy the command here, paste it in. But what's interesting to me here is that you notice that this still says it's running. I think this is because it has been less than 5 minutes since I took that node down. So it doesn't register that the workload isn't there and it won't try and reschedule it until after that expires. I could probably force it by going ahead and doing an OC delete node on this node. See what happens there. So yeah. So now it's registering that those are terminating. they're not actually terminating because, again, the node isn't even there, right? It's not powered on. There's no way it can talk to it. There's no way that those were running before. But at least we can see that, hey, there is something happening there. If we come down here, so we're just keep following down. So I'm going to copy this part of the command. And what I want to do here is I want to connect to one of the two surviving etcd pods, right? So this is going to be our, so we know that these are the two good ones. So we'll connect to this guy. Oops. Right, so now I'm inside of the etcd pod. We can do this member list command. We see our three members here. So here's the one that we took out. This is the bad one. So we can see the example output follows the same thing. And now we need to remove one of our members, the failed etcd cluster member. So member remove. So control 00 is the one that I failed. So we'll go with the ID from that. Go ahead and remove it. And just to double check, we'll look at our member list again. And we have just the two remaining valid up control plane nodes. Johnny, by the way, feel free to interrupt me with any questions that pop up. So.
Yep. Yeah. I was just reaching out to the group to let them know if they have any questions to ask them, and I'll make sure I get them out.
I am not paying attention to chat at all. So.
Yep. I got you.
All right. So remove the old secrets. All right. So I removed. So at this point, our node has failed. I have removed the failed node from the etcd cluster. So now I need to go into and remove our secrets. So rep for control-00. So I suspect, and the reason why we're getting a delay here is because this is the API VIP bouncing around a little bit. It'll probably take it a couple of seconds. And I don't know why it does this. It did this to me yesterday when I was testing this as well, where it kind of goes up and down a little bit as I modify things.
Yeah, it's probably the response in the load balancer where it's trying to like cycle through.
Yeah. So I suspect that had I done a quote unquote full UPI deployment or non-integrated deployment where I have an external load balancer, responsible for the API and all that, that would have been fine. We wouldn't be seeing this. This is simply because I'm using the VIP, the Keep Alive D managed VIP for these IP addresses. I probably should have checked which one was hosting it. Just
whoops.
Just to avoid the drama, right?
So one thing that's pretty cool about this too is that like if you were to follow like the Kubernetes documentation and do something like this with Kubernetes as well, like the process is very similar. If you're going to do like upstream Kubernetes etcd, restore stuff like that, backups and restores.
Well, now I have no idea what's going on. What's happening here? Let's
so
see. That one's
Karate
down.
Chop. Karate Chop asks, if a node was to fail, like a motherboard, for example, how long would it take OpenShift to realize that it's failed and reschedule the workload that was assigned to the node to the other nodes? I think it's 5 minutes, right? Like where it goes through and it cycles.
Yeah. So by default, it's 5 minutes. It'll declare the node unreachable, and then it'll reschedule the workload after that. The exception being with PVCs. So the mounted PVCs, there's like a whole nother timeout that has to happen there before it will mount those. So this is usually the OpenShift Vert guys make a big deal out of that because with a virtual machine, I want to be able to reschedule it as soon as possible. So how do I reduce that HA time for a virtual machine? And that's where the whole poison pill operator thing came from. Of my node went down. I don't want to wait 5 minutes for Kubernetes to say it's not reachable. And then I need to wait, somewhere between 1 and 5 additional minutes for the PVC to free up. Instead, I'm going to use poison pill operator that is going to, simultaneously reboot the node and then remove it from the cluster. So that way it immediately triggers a reschedule of all that workload. And because the node is rebooted, we're confident that the PVCs aren't mounted, so it can immediately remount those as well. So, all right. So you see that my API momentarily came back. I don't know what's going on here. It's weird. So yeah, RHOPE 9 node health check. So node health check in combination with a machine remedy. What is that called? So there's an action that it can take where it will, with IPI, basically when node health check fails for, say 3 times in 3 minutes, just delete the node. And if you're using like bare metal IPI, then effectively it will reprovision the node and rejoin it to the cluster, just because IPI expects it to be there. Come on, what's going on here? This is like I'm feeling like I'm doing one of your
I wasn't gonna say
demos,
anything.
Johnny.
I wasn't gonna say anything. I was like, I was just gonna let it go.
I was just looking like here. Let's refresh vSphere. So the IP is on here. Like, what's going on? Why are we bouncing around? And I literally just reprovisioned this cluster this morning. It should be all right. It's there for the moment. We'll see what happens. All right, so let's try our OC get secrets again. There we go. OC get secrets. So here's our 3 secrets for the control 00 node. So I need to delete those secrets. Dash n OpenShift etcd. And we'll just take care of all 3 of these in one command.
Yeah, and Andrew, whenever you get a chance, Thomas Fall was asking, hopefully I said that right, was asking if the timeout is customizable for like that 5-minute sync.
Yes, but so technically yes, certainly upstream. I don't know if OpenShift supports modifying that, and that's
I wasn't sure.
Thomas P. Hall.
Oh, Thomas P. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So then Thomas P. Hall.
So Thomas Hall, yeah. So yeah, I think it technically is customizable. It might be a scheduler setting, it might be a kubelet setting. I'm not sure which. So yeah. All right, so our secrets are gone now. Switch back over here. So delete the secrets. This is what I just did. They just did it in 3 separate commands in the docs. And now we have this very generic delete and recreate the control plane machine. And then they give you this set of instructions for how to do it using IPI, right? So OC get machines, and here's how to delete the machine, and then we're going to create a new one. So basically, with IPI and machine API integration, you can manually create the machine object and trigger it to create a machine. For example, they did this in AWS. We're not using AWS, right? We don't have that option. So you saw I deleted the node from the cluster, right? I don't have a control 00 any longer. So now what do I do? So the first thing that I need to do is I need to extract, I need to get the machine config, the ignition config for the control plane nodes. So if I do a history and grep for extract, grep for if I spell extract correctly. So I have this command, OC extract from the machine API. Let me copy it out here. So make it easier to read too. OC extract from machine API namespace a secret called master-user-data-managed. I want specifically the user data key. I'm going to extract it to the terminal, so to dash, and then I'm going to redirect that into a specific file, master.ign. So let's go ahead and do that. And it appears that my API is still flip-flopping, so it's going to take it a second to time out. Yep. Come on. You can do it, buddy.
Come on, little buddy.
I have the Jeopardy theme song playing in my head right now.
Indeed, indeed. I could start singing, but I think that'd be bad.
I appreciate your singing, Johnny. Don't be shy.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Somebody does.
Oh, come on. So I suspect what's happening behind the scenes here is the VIP is in place, but for whatever reason, the API pods are bouncing up and down. I'm sure I could troubleshoot that. I'm just going to try and muscle through this. So yeah, you can see it's unhappy right now. It's definitely struggling to respond.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. All right, so now if I do a quick cat on the file I just created and put that to JQ so we can read it, you can see it's just like if you created the ignition config for a control plane node using OpenShift install, right? It's going to say, go here for your real machine ignition config, and here's the certificate authority that you need so you don't freak out, right? So very straightforward, very standard from that respect. So all I need to do now is I need to host this on a web server, because the way that we are going to recover this node is basically to provision a new node, just like I were doing a bare metal non-integrated installation, right? So I'm going to host this on a web server. I'm going to take my virtual machine. I'm going to boot it to the live ISO. And then I'm going to do a CoreOS install and point it to this config. So let's do an SCP.
Real quick, Andrew, before you move on, can you kind of go back to the console and show everybody, like, just why you were being patient and then how you knew that things were ready? You know what I mean? Because I think that this is a good chance to show, like, hey, we hit a wall, we had a problem, but instead of, like, freaking out and killing everything and restarting, like, you went and looked at some things. Can you kind of walk through that really quick?
Yeah. So right here you can see immediately the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we remove that control plane node, it has now caused the operator responsible for Kube API server and probably OpenShift API server too. You can see it's only 81 seconds, right? So both of those are they're bouncing up and down because they want to recover back to their state. So I'm sure that I could do something like, OC get pods -n kube -system. If I do a describe on my cluster operator, it'll give me this related objects. So if I look down through here, I have this namespaces, and I'm looking for OpenShift Kube API server, right? So that one looks like the right one. So we'll do an OC get pods. Actually, it'll be the operator that's bouncing up and down. So Kube API server operator. Oops. Got my -n.
Mm-hmm.
And from here, I can look at the logs. So OC logs. This guy. And yeah, you can see it for whatever reason. I'm sure I could dig through this and figure it out as to why it keeps wanting to do a revision, transition to 12, why it keeps wanting to do this. But essentially, it was an assumption and a safe bet on my side that the API server was freaking out and is trying to go through its thing in order to get to the right revision or the right config. So, and when it does that, it takes down pods. So even though the VIP isn't bouncing around like I had originally said, it's the pods that are the API server that are bouncing around. And again, I don't there is a reason why the API server pods take so long, or why updating this takes so long. I think it has to do with there's like a codependency between API server and authentication. So API server bounces and then authentication bounces, and API server doesn't declare itself ready until authentication comes back, and then it's something like that. So it just for whatever reason it takes these a long time to longer than most others to bounce.
Yeah, for sure. No, I just wanted to. It was a great opportunity, I thought, to kind of show, like, sometimes you're going to have a problem when you're expecting a certain output, and things are going to go wrong eventually, and to just understand how how do I debug this quickly, or how do I look and see it and get that warm fuzzy that like, okay, at least I understand the problem.
Yeah.
And then Karate Chop, I believe that there is a cheat sheet. I'll try and find it, but if not, then I'm sure that we could probably slap one together for like troubleshooting and stuff like that.
Yep. There's a KCS. We can dig that up. Like I'll have to do it in one of my other browser windows and look it up. So all I did here, just SCP that ignition file that we extracted a moment ago, and I pushed this over into my helper node web server. So let's open a new browser window, and we want to browse to this just to make sure that it's there, that it's available. Right, 503 unavailable. So, because I need to put in the right port, and I need to put in the location. ORV-master, we can see 0330, so at 1136, which is today. And if I click on that, I get my control plane ignition file JSON. So everything worked there. We're good to go. All right. So basically, we have everything we need staged, except for our CoreOS ISO. So I'm going to go to mirror.openshift.com. And it drops me into this mirror. So really the way that you would want to do this is to go, either through console.redhat.com or to the customer portal, access.redhat.com. I'm cheating because I can, and just browsing directly to the mirror. And I want to go to dependencies, and then we want CoreOS 4.10, and there's only one. So all I've done, and I've already done this, I downloaded in my instance the live ISO. So if we look through here, we have live.iso. So when I boot the virtual machine to this ISO, it will drop me into literally a live environment, right? Just like any other live ISO. And from here, I can configure the nodes and do a bunch of other things inside of it. I could also do this by booting to the ISO and using a kernel parameter, but potato. So I've already downloaded that ISO. If we switch over to our data store view here, we can see that I've got my CoreOS 4.10.3 ISO. So let's come back over to our failed control plane node. Rather than completely destroying this virtual machine and going through that process, all I'm going to do is remove our hard disk. So delete from data store, and we'll let that do its thing. And then we will just give it back a new disk. So I'm going to give it 120 gigabyte drive. I want it to be thin provisioned because I don't have enough disk space. And then down here for my CD DVD drive, I'm going to connect it to a data store ISO file. And I'm going to connect it to our CoreOS ISO and make sure that we tick this connect at power on. Okay. We'll give it a second to update its config, and then we will power it on. And come on. Did I miss the button here? What happened? Attempted operation cannot be performed in the... No, I don't want to send details. What happened? What am I looking for here? I want tasks. Why did you not turn on? One more time? No? Okay. Come on, VMware. You've got your disk. You've got your ISO file. Connect to power on. Okay. Maybe I will have to. Oh, it already is powered on. Of course. Web interface.
Cobra.
Yeah, when did we first start using the vSphere? Like way back when it was the desktop thing, and you didn't have to worry about it refreshing, right? And now,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was just think that same thing. Like I remember the old UI.
So yeah, over here it shows not powered on, but it is powered on. Anyways, so all that happened while I was banging my head against that was it booted to the live ISO, and you see it drops us directly into this. So one thing to note here, remember that I used a DHCP reservation. So it already got its IP address and its host name. So if I had completely destroyed this virtual machine, all I would want to do is go in and create a new, change the old DHCP reservation to use this one's MAC address. So I want to do exactly as the command here says, CoreOS installer. So sudo CoreOS installer install to do ignition URL. I can't talk and type at the same time.
So Andrew, G. Kumar asked if we could do an episode on the OpenShift update service operator in disconnected environments.
Yeah, we came close to doing that when we did the deep dive, right? And then we ran out of time. So yeah, we can do that. Where was that URL? Nope, not you. Sorry, I'm having a moment. So ignition /orv-master.ign. Nope. There we go. Ignition /orv-master.ign. And importantly, I want to do, because this is both HTTP URL as well as I'm not providing a SHA hash of the file, I want to do --insecure-ignition. So where did I get that from? So let's come to our documentation here. I want to go to install, and I want to go to installing on any platform. And then I'm going to open that just in a new tab so I can keep our etcd recovery docs here. And if I scroll way on down here to installing Arcos, and if I scroll down through here, right, installing using an ISO image, this is what we're doing. So see how it describes this SHA-512 sum, blah, 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 and then you can take that, and as we get down through here, it'll say run CoreOS installer, install, provide the URL, and then provide ignition hash. So I'm going to take the risk and say that nobody has hacked my ignition, nobody is modifying it, so I'm going to trust it to not be secure. And the way that we work around that, if we keep on scrolling down, apologies for the scrolling, if we scroll all the way down through here, we'll eventually hit the part of the docs that has all of the parameters for CoreOS installer. Here we go. So CoreOS installer install subcommand options. And I have this down here, insecure ignition. You can say allow ignition URL without HTTPS or hash, which is precisely what I'm doing. Right. So -- insecure ignition. Once I find the right window, and we hit go. Oh, right. And I got to provide a location where it's going to install to. Yep. So there we go.
So our Hope 9 has had enough of the Andrew and Johnny stream, and he's wondering when we're going to bring Ortwin back to do some more, to go through some more slides.
Maybe we should do that on the 13th. Maybe we should see if
it's not a bad idea. Yeah.
Available. Yeah.
Hit it while it's still fresh.
Yeah. So what are we talking about next week? Next week is security with Kirsten Newcomer. So if you're not subscribed, go ahead and click the button so that way you know when that comes up. You can also follow us on social media. Johnny and I have been trying to do a much better job around posting topics for the upcoming streams on Twitter and LinkedIn and Reddit and all the places. So. And for Red Hatters, I think, so we have a tool called Bamboo. I think we've also been posting those into Bamboo. So it's another way you can stay informed of what we're doing. So CoreOS installer ran here. I don't know what it's doing in the background, but it takes it a few extra seconds to go ahead and finish writing the CoreOS install to disk. Once that's done, what I'm going to do is shut down this virtual machine and disconnect that installation ISO and then power on the VM. So the next steps after that are going to be basically we wait. So as soon as I power this off and restart it, I'm going to move over to the Grafana side of things, because basically we wait for the CSRs to appear. Once we approve the CSRs, then basically magic happens. And magic in this case means operators. So effectively, once it sees the new control plane node join, the etcd operators and everything else will automatically redeploy everything to it, and it'll just work. Right? We wait a few minutes, and it'll recover. It'll heal itself back. All right, there we go. So writing it, and it's back. It's done. So I'm just going to do a shutdown -h now, so we can power off our virtual machine, and that's done. So we'll do a refresh here. Let's hide this. Do a refresh here. So there, it's powered off. So edit settings. We will change this back to client device and power it back on.
So R Hope 9 said that he likes today's topic. It's the moment that most people dread the most, when things are supposed to happen and then they don't, or you're waiting for something to finish and you have no idea what's actually happening in the background.
Yeah. All right. So vSphere is doing its thing. It should be powering on here. Come on, console. Anyways, it's a standard boot. You'll see it go through its process. I'll leave that open for now. But all we're waiting on at this point is we do our OC get CSR. We're just waiting for the CSRs for this guy to appear in there. It'll take a couple of minutes. So I'm going to change topics over to Grafana, and I'll check back in a couple of minutes. Johnny, don't let me forget. So I'll check back in a couple of minutes. We'll approve those CSRs, and then it'll take another 5 or 10 minutes for everything to heal itself, and then we can see. And just to check real quick here. So one, you see there's all kinds of errors happening inside of my console for this guy. I come down here to nodes. You can see I'm missing a node, right? We'll see this pop back in once it gets there. So one thing, if you're sharp-eyed, so I installed this cluster through assisted installer, and it's on vSphere, right? You all just literally saw me do this on vSphere. I don't know why, and I just discovered this yesterday, but like the nodes are showing up as under a machine set, and they show up as bare metal hosts, but unmanaged. So I'm not sure what this means yet, but it's interesting to me. So maybe, Johnny, another potential topic for the near future is we should get the assisted installer folks on, and have them walk through a few things and talk to us about kind of exactly what we're seeing here. But yeah, if you saw there, my nodes, some of them have this machine associated with it. And I don't, like I said, I don't quite know what that means.
Yeah, that'd be awesome to have them come in and clear that up.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. We're just going to sit back and wait a few minutes for that to happen. And meanwhile, I'm going to switch over to our AWS instance. And I just used AWS for this, mostly because my lab isn't big enough to deploy to full clusters. So if we look down here, same thing as before. I've got 5 nodes, actually 6 nodes because it's AWS. So 1, 2, 3 control plane nodes, 1, 2, 3 compute nodes inside of my cluster. So this one is pretty straightforward, right? So if I look at my observe and I go to metrics here, so this is where I can query Prometheus directly for information, right? So I can do like node. There's all kinds of stuff in here. So I'm just going to select one of these at random, run my query, and you can see it spits back all the information that's in Prometheus. I can go to dashboards, and I have this, here, we'll switch to the etcd one. So I have all of my etcd dashboards, right? All the stuff that I've come to expect and know. And if you know, or if you're aware of it, we do still have Grafana installed, right? So if I go to networking and routes, and then if I look down through here, I've got this Grafana, right? And I can click on this guy and go through and accept all this stuff. Yep, we'll log in as me. Maybe. Yes, I do want to assign myself those permissions. Thank you for asking.
Mind if I do?
yeah, so I can go in here and right, it's all the same dashboards that I come to know and love and expect. But one, this instance of Grafana is read only, and two, this is what we have deprecated and basically we've declared is eventually going to go away, right? So what if I want to, modify this? What if I want, for example, I want the node uh, uh, dashboard because we're running the node exporter. So there's a great default or community created, I guess, dashboard for the node exporter that shows all kinds of information about my nodes. What if I want to see that? So this is what we're going to address is how do I deploy my own Grafana so that I can customize it so that I can get whatever information I want out of my particular cluster. So step one is to go to Operator Hub and for Grafana. You'll notice that this is a community operator, so it's going to remind me that it's a community operator. So yes, we're going to go ahead and hit install. So I'm going to create a project for this, and my project name is very creatively going to be named Grafana. And that's all I need to do to install the operator, right? So we'll hit install. And that'll take a couple of minutes while that's thinking about it. We'll come back here and check on this guy. Nope, still not there yet. You're still doing your thing. Yeah, so you notice it hasn't picked up its host name yet and stuff like that. So in fact, it got a completely different IP. That's strange. I'm just going to trust that to do its thing, and we'll see what happens.
So Mike Murphy was asking, this is about the canary route operator, asking if the route checks are performed by the stat port or HTTP or HTTPS. I think it's HTTP that it's doing the stat check on, or that it's doing the check on, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. How would we check that? We can check that by going to... There is a CRD for that, and I'm trying to remember what it is.
The operator is called canary operator or something like that.
I think it's probe under monitoring. No. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There's all of those should be defined somewhere in here. Here we go. And CPU under ingress. Ingress Prometheus, no insights. No, that's for the dashboard. So we don't want a Prometheus rules object. What do we want? We want... we'll have to look that up. Yeah. It is possible to check. I'm just not remembering it off the top of my head. So let's...
Yeah, I just vaguely remember, like, if you had, like, a redirect with HTTP to HTTPS, it would fail back in the day. So, like, yeah. We'll look it up, though, Mike Murphy. We'll get back to you.
All right, so my Grafana operator finished deploying. You see here I'm in my Grafana project. If I click into this guy, you'll notice that there are 4 CRDs that it is responsible for. So Grafana, which is literally an installation or a deployment of Grafana. We have a Grafana data source. We have a notification channel and a dashboard. And I just now noticed the inconsistency that's going to make me crazy of there's a space here, but not here or here. So data source, as you would expect, is literally a data source, right? Hey, Prometheus or Grafana, where do you want to get your data from? In our instance, it's going to be Prometheus. Dashboard is, hey, what dashboards do you want to make available? So these 2 CRDs, actually these 3 CRDs, are all utilized by the Grafana instance to basically precede or get data for it. So this can be useful for a couple of different reasons. So one, by default, when I create an instance of a Grafana, it's not persistent. There's no PVC associated with it or anything like that. Instead, it deploys it, and then it uses these CRDs to populate information in it, right? It'll look at the data source, and it'll say, okay, I need to go and grab, I need to configure this inside of my deployed Grafana instance, same thing for dashboards, etc. So let's look at a couple of things. So first, let's go to our Grafanas, and I'm going to create a Grafana. And I'm going to use YAML view because it's way easier for what we want to do here. So off to the side here, and I cannot make this any bigger, can I? I don't think I can. So apologies that it might be a little hard to read. But we'll walk through what this looks like. So first I'm going to give it a name, and then I'm going to provide a bunch of different information here. So how did I determine everything that I want from here? So one, I can use the form view, right? And in the form view, I can go through and I can fill out each one of these things, and it'll do kind of exactly what I want right here. Admin password is admin, which you can see over here. I set admin password equals admin. Alternatively, you can go to GitHub for the Grafana operator. So I will paste that into Twitch as soon as I find the window. We'll paste that into Twitch. So inside of here, I can look at all the documentation that's in here. I'm not going to scroll through that because I know where I'm going. And what I want to do is go to documentation, and I want to go to, in my instance, right, grafana.yaml. And this gives me an example. And I think this one I almost exactly copied out. So one thing I haven't found, and this is maybe Andrew just hasn't been looking close enough. I haven't found a good, like, what are all of the fields? What's the description for all of the fields available in that CRD? So I did find, so where is that file at? So if I go to Grafana operator and I go to API and I want the integrately v1 alpha 1, and I go to Grafana types, I think that's the file I want. Yep, Grafana types. So this is basically the Go level descriptor for the API. So we can see, for example, if I search for security and hold down, like here's my Grafana config security API structure. And down through here, here's our admin user, here's our admin passwords, all of the stuff that I need in order to do that. Like I said, I haven't found in the documentation here on GitHub, like where all of this is described at. So this is just, I've sadly looked at enough of these CRD definitions, API definitions, that I had a good idea of where to look. And I can see in the examples. So just for reference, let's go all the way back up here to the top, Grafana operator.
And Waleed was asking
deploy.
if you couldn't get this information out of the like OC explain. I think you could get like the top level out of the explain, but like the actual definition and descriptions of what they do is what you're actually looking for, right?
Can do an OC explain grafana.spec. I can talk and type. So spec dot. So what do I want? Config. So yeah, that's a great point, Waleed. You can see here all of the objects, all the stuff that's inside of here, and I can do like, config.auth and config.security and .admin underscore passwords. But you can see again, it's super basic what's in here. So this is excellent point, Waleed. This is the integrated OpenShift CLI, and we can do the same thing. Where'd my window go? You can see over here in the schema, v details, and then I can go down here to config, and then I can go down here to security. Alphabet is hard. So here, admin password, right? So yeah, I can look in here. That is an excellent point. I should have probably started with that instead of digging through Go code. But anyways, so I'm setting a default username and passwords, telling it to log out to the console, telling it to enable an anonymous login, right? All of this stuff is standard Grafana config. Disable the login form, disable or keep the login form, but disable the sign out menu. So data storage for this one, I'm going to request a PVC. So you can see it's an RWO PVC coming from our GP2 CSI storage class, which is configured by default with 4.10. It is not the default, but it is configured by default. I want it to create an ingress, so we'll have a route for us. And then it'll also create a service for us. So let's click create and let's see what happens. And while that's doing its thing, we'll check on this guy again. Here's our first CSR.
Before you approve that real quick, can you do like an OC get nodes?
So you can see with this first certificate, it doesn't appear at all.
Yep.
Right, because it's the node bootstrapper. So OC ADM certificate approve, and we get the name. And then should happen here is it'll pop in. I think it'll pop in after that. So here's our second one. You can see it's only 4 seconds old.
Yeah, so the reason why I was asking for that is because, like, you know, sometimes we have people that will turn their clusters off over the weekend, right? Or on a Friday night or whatever. And so they'll come back on Monday and they'll have their cluster, essentially it's up, but it's really down. And it comes down to these things where the CSRs need to be approved because they've timed out.
Yeah. So I did do, so a couple of things here. So one, I probably should not have approved this CSR. And the reason for that is because you see it didn't get the right host name. And this goes back to what I was saying a moment ago, right? It never picked up, or it picked up a whole new IP address, and that doesn't have the DHCP lease associated with it. So that could be something with my DHCP server, and it doesn't want to give out the same lease to what it thinks is a different host. I don't know what's going on there. But because that didn't get the right node name, I'm not confident that this is going to recover, because it's going to want to try and look up the right. It's going to want to try and look that up by host name, and that's going to fail. So, in theory, assuming everything was correct, so let's say I approved this one, I saw, oh wait, that's not right. What I should have done is basically redone that whole process of reprovisioning the node and made sure that it got the right host name, right IP and right host name. And at that point, again, basically, if everything was working, if this was showing up as OC or ORV control 00, I don't have to do anything at this point. After a couple of minutes, it'll come back and everything will be fine. Let's see, CO. Okay, you can see it does register that there is a new control plane node, because up here you see the role is master. So most of the operators are going to register that, and they're all going through and trying to reapply the configuration. But again, because this thinks its name is localhost, and there is obviously localhost isn't going to work when it's trying to reach a remote node. I'm expecting this to fail, so we'll let it go while we finish up with our Grafana over here. So let's come down here to our workloads, and we've got our Grafana deployment up and running. And if I come down here to networking and routes, we've got our route, and I can click on this guy. And yes, I know I need to accept the certificate. And I'm in Grafana, right? Just like that. So let's go to our sign-in. And I'm going to sign in with admin and admin. And because this is the first time I'm logging in, it wants me to set a new password, which I'm going to set. And here we are, right? I can go in and I can configure all the stuff that I need. So how do I configure this to access the internal Prometheus or the internal Thanos endpoints? So in order to do that, I'm going to need a service account. So if I do, let's see, project, to go into the Grafana project, get service account. And inside of here, I've got this Grafana service account. You can see it was just created. So there's a blog post that was created a while ago by some of the folks. Let's see, I want to copy this link and bring it up over here. And I'll share this with Stephanie on the back end so she can share it out. So inside of here, this blog post describes kind of exactly the process that we're going through. So I want to add the cluster role, cluster monitoring view to our Grafana service account. So we'll copy that command. Right, so we see that we added the authorization, and now I need to get a service token for, excuse me, a bearer token for my service account. So OC service accounts is the command that we're working with here. Get token for the Grafana service account that we just looked at here. And in the namespace, Grafana, someday I'll remember how to spell Grafana the right first time. And it's going to spit back at me this guy, right? So this is what we use to authenticate over to, or internally over to Prometheus. So I can come back over here and I can say add data source. I want to add a Prometheus. We'll give it the lovely name Prometheus. So I'm going to skip over this down here by default because I want to come down here to headers and I want to add a authorization, I think. Authorization. No, I don't remember. Is it in here? Authorization. And then my value is going to be error. I know it's dotting it out. So BEARER space, and then that big old long string that I just posted. So we see here, and where I got that from is this, right? So all I'm using is that. Now, the reason why I'm doing it this way and not with this Grafana data source CRD is because I have a PVC, which means that this will persist. So I can do it this way if I so choose, and it won't affect anything. If I didn't have that PVC there, so none of this was persistent, then I would want to do it with our CRD from over here. And I'll show that in just a moment. But I wanted to do it the harder, but I think the way that a lot of people will prefer, because it gives them that, kind of traditional full Grafana experience. I wanted to do that first. So the last thing that we need is the URL to use. So if we look in here, this is going to point at the Thanos query, right? But I can do a OC get service -n OpenShift monitoring. And you see that I have this Prometheus Kubernetes, right? So all I need for that is the same, I follow the same URL pattern of prometheus-kubernetes.openshift monitoring.service. So just basically replace Kubernetes- or Prometheus-Kubernetes in this line. And while I was just looking over to the side there, I cheated and grabbed that. So our URL is going to be prometheus-kubernetes.openshift-monitoring.svc port 9091. And now I can save and test. And why am I getting a bad gateway? Let's see what's going on here. Name Prometheus, URL. That's what I get for not having specifically tested this one before.
Thanks for joining, Waleed. Hey, Andrew, real quick, I know you're like trying to debug something. Delav had asked if there's a way to create custom dashboards for one of our application. Do I need to have anything specific enabled on the application, i.e. /metrics endpoint? I think Rick did a good job of answering this though, and said that like essentially you just need to enable the metrics collection on that workspace.
Yeah. So what you would do is, if you want to do it through the cluster monitoring stack, you would go in and you would enable user workload monitoring. Right, enabling monitoring for user-defined projects. So it's literally just a config map setting. And what that'll do is that will deploy a second Prometheus instance, and you can then use the standard CRDs in order to go through and configure metrics endpoints and the rules and all that other stuff. And then you can either query that directly. So just like you saw me do a moment ago, there'll be another. I don't remember what it's called. It's like Prometheus-user or something like that. So there'll be a second Prometheus, or you can query the Thanos endpoint. So the reason why I'm choosing to use Prometheus here instead of Thanos is because Thanos slightly alters the schema. So if I want to use, for example, if I browse to, what am I looking for? On dashboards. I go to here, like let's say I wanted to use the node exporter dashboard. So if I were to just try and use this community dashboard, it wouldn't work because Thanos doesn't use the same, I think it adds a namespace or something. Whereas pointing it directly at Prometheus does work. But I'm still not sure why this isn't working. Why? Oh, TLS skip verify. I bet that's what it is. There we go.
Rick for the win.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So our data source is configured. Now I can come over here to, where are my dashboards? I so infrequently do this that I always forget. Manage. So I want to import a dashboard. I'm going to use number 1860. Load, node exporter full. Sure, that sounds great. Import. Oh, right. You do need a dash or a data source, don't you? And just like that, I've got my node exporter. Right. So yeah, I just stood up this cluster you can see this morning at 7:15 or whatever. But yeah, that's how we create custom dashboards, right? You want to fully create something yourself, right? You can go in and you can create a brand new whatever metrics you want inside of here type of thing. Do it. Create dashboards, right? Do all the things that you do. I will admit that I am terrible at PromQL and managing these in Grafana, so I am not going to embarrass myself by attempting it. But yeah, so node exporter full. So just like that, super easy. Let's change this to the last 15 minutes. Sure. And I can, from here, if I wanted to, there's a bunch of different configuration that I can add. So for example, if we go back to our Grafana GitHub, Grafana operator GitHub, in here, so I'm in the Grafana operator deploy examples directory. If we go into OAuth, I can integrate this with OpenShift's OAuth, right? So instead of me having to log in using, when I browse to this external route, instead of me having to log in with my admin username or a separate authentication scheme, I can integrate it in with OpenShift's authentication. So that way that only OpenShift users are able to access this, right? Type of thing. So, all right. So that one's good, right? We're able to deploy it. We're able to customize it. Everything will persist because we've got a persistent volume inside of there. So I just switch back over to our console. And if I scroll down to our persistent volume claims, here's my Grafana PVC, which is happily bound to or happily mounted by our running, working Grafana. So let's go ahead and destroy that guy, because that's how I do.
Indeed.
So let's come to our Grafanas, and this time we're going to delete the Grafana.
And Rick, I don't know if you're joking about the book, but if you're not, go ahead and plug the title in. We appreciate your help. It was awesome that you jumped in there if you're still on.
So this time, I'm going to create a Grafana data source. All right, so this is just the other side of what I just showed. So before, I went into Prometheus, again, because it's a persistent instance, and provided all of this stuff manually, just like if I had deployed Grafana to a standalone host somewhere. This time, I am going to configure it as a ephemeral Grafana instance that is going to get its config, so data source and dashboard, from something else. So let's go to bearer token. So let's regenerate a new bearer token. Oh, I need to create our service account. OC create service account. Grafana. Am I typing this one? I can copy and paste. And then I need to do the same thing of assign permissions because it got destroyed before. Add policy. Now I can generate my token. So I've got a new bearer token for authentication. So we'll copy that and come back over here and we'll paste this guy in. So other than that, you can see that I set all of the same things in here that I did from the GUI a moment ago, right? So yes, this is the default. I'm going to set an authorization header, TLS skip verify, because we're not providing the CA trust chain. And here is my bearer token. You can see that this is the secure JSON. That's why it was dotted out in the GUI. And here's my endpoint URL, again, Prometheus. So we'll click create on that guy. Now, if I had a Grafana deployed, creating that object would trigger it to be redeployed, so it can introduce this data source. So you don't have to undeploy Grafana to do this. I'm just doing it because I'm going to deploy one without a PVC. And so I'm not going to create a dashboard here. Actually, I will create a dashboard. But I'm going to caveat it by saying, so let's go back to our examples, and dashboards. So we have this dashboard from Grafana. And what I have found is when I create this object, it queries the Grafana endpoint, the Grafana URL, somewhat frequently, like frequently enough that every time I've used this method to create one, it has resulted in an error after a few minutes where Grafana basically kicks back a 400 saying you're querying too much. So it'll work for a few minutes and then it stops working, which is not good. So my workaround for that, and I don't have it hosted externally, unfortunately, I copied that dashboard, the JSON for it, and I dropped it into a URL on my local one. Actually, I wonder if that'll work. Probably not, because I think that's a very plain one. Actually, you know what? I bet I can do download JSON. And what happens if I open this? I know, right? I want to see if I can put this into a gist.
Oh, it's going to work.
Let's plug that in there and create this. I know y'all can't see what I'm doing, but I'm literally just creating a gist off to the side here. All right, so I've got that. Where'd my window go here? Yep, I know, I undeployed you. You're very broken. So Grafana dashboard from URL. So we'll copy this out. So I'm on the Grafana dashboards. I want to create a new one. Paste in what we just copied. So Grafana dashboard from URL. And I'm going to replace this with the URL of my gist. So just to show you what that looks like, is this dashboard.json. It has all the stuff in here. I suppose I do need to use the raw URL. So we'll copy that guy. All right. And we'll go ahead and create our dashboard. So again, I'm doing that because for me personally, I have not looked into it at all. Whenever I configure that, from grafana.com source, it causes errors for me. And the last thing that we need to do is create a new Grafana. So let me copy and paste the Grafana instance that I had before. And we'll kind of walk through this again. So same stuff as before, right? Config, here's our security, username and password. Technically, I don't need this because in theory, everything will be created for me. And then I'm going to keep this as simple Grafana here. You'll notice that I'm not providing a data source down here, but I do need to add one thing. So when I created that, I'll use this as the example. So you notice when I created this Grafana dashboard, I added a label to it, app Grafana. And the reason why I want that is because down here, I'm going to add a dashboard label selector. So it will automatically import or ingest any dashboard objects that have a label with the name app and a value of Grafana in it. So now I should be able to hit create here and hope for the best. And while we're doing that, we're going to check on this guy and see that things are probably still horribly broken. I can't believe that actually worked. Oh,
Every time.
Wow.
Never a doubt.
I did not expect that to actually work. It came back with the name localhost. That's I think let me think about that for a minute. So let's see. Let's do oc git pod -in OpenShift cd cd localhost. Let's look at this guy. So oc pod -in OpenShift etcd -o YAML pipe to less. So I think this worked because etcd, actually configures with IPs.
IP. Yep.
I would be surprised, or I would not be surprised if we see some errors like querying the API because it's going to have a certificate that has localhost in the name.
Yeah.
But at least etcd came back at this point. That alone is, today I learned, right?
Yeah.
So it will technically work, even if you screw up your DHCP reservation and don't fix it. All right.
Oh, we did that on purpose. We meant to do that.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, our cluster is here. It's back. Everything is happy. Everything is healthy. At least on the surface. Again, I'm a little suspect of that local host, but yeah, you saw I didn't do anything except sit back and wait. What's complaining over here? Yeah, installer control 2, control 1. I can probably delete these and they'll reschedule if I had to guess. These are old, created at 743. I'm ruthless with these failed pods, by the way.
Oh, dude, I am too. I'm all about those, like delete pod -- all.
All right, there we go. So delete all those. They haven't come back, so they weren't valid anyways. But yeah, see, it was it's straightforward, right? Replacing a control plane node, even with assisted installer or any of the others without IPI installed there. Literally reprovision the node, pointed at that extracted control plane ignition file, and basically let it join the cluster. And everybody, all of the operators work their magic. All right, let's get back to our Grafana real quick here. So you can see that this guy should be done. Go to our routes, open it up again. So this time you see I am not logged in, but I should have a node exporter dashboard. Yay. I didn't have to do anything.
And the cool part is that like all this can be automated. I mean, like there's no reason why you have to go through and go through the UI and do all this configuration. You can pull down all your manifests and then use some type of pipeline or Argo or whatever.
Yeah, where's Christian? GitOps all the way.
I know. I'm trying to get my T-shirt. I'm plugging it enough to where I get a free T-shirt.
So yeah, it again, I can log in here and do all the normal stuff, but remember this one doesn't have a PVC attached. So any of the changes that I make here are going to be ephemeral. So you can get the best of both worlds, I think, where you attach a PVC and you use those custom resource definitions. I don't know precisely how it would treat that, because if we look, and if we go to our pods and we go to our Grafana deployment pod, so if I do a mount and grep for dashboard, for example, right, it mounts these underneath Grafana Etsy, file system. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if those will kind of, for lack of a better term, step on each other. or if the ones that you create actually, end up in somewhere else. If I were to create them myself, you can see there's, provisioning. I haven't investigated with the operator enough to see when I create that PVC, where does it mount the PVC at? Does it get mounted here? And if so, when I do this cd into dashboards, so you can see, I didn't create the dashboard. Did I? Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you did.
So yeah, it's one of those, I don't know precisely how that behavior works and what happens there. So anyways, just like that. Surprisingly straightforward. I will say that I banged my head a little bit up until I found this blog post that explained the get token command here. Once I had that, it was pretty straightforward to just point at these things. But yeah, I on Slack, I asked the engineering guys, and it was like I asked them, and then I sat there and I was thinking about it for about 5 minutes. And I said, I should really search for this. And of course, as soon as I searched for it and pulled up this blog post, they responded with, "Have you seen this blog post?"
Naturally.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So Thomas Hall asked, can we put all the data in config maps or CRs? So if you're going to do custom dashboards, that would actually be like a dashboard resource. And then so if you had some config stuff that needed to be in a map, yeah, you could do that. So the way that we do it on our patterns is we actually create the dashboard resources and then the Grafana templates and all that. And yeah, it just kind of works, so that's pretty awesome.
So here's a example in their GitHub repo. So Grafana dashboard that is pointed at a config map. And then down here's the config map that has all of the YAML for it. So you can do it that way too. They have a bunch of different options for getting those. So here's from grafana.com, from config map, from a hosted URL. Let's see, here's one with plugins. So if you want to add plugins, you can do that. Keycloak, I'm not familiar with. Simple dashboard, here you can literally define it just as JSON in the object if you so choose.
Yeah, that's how we do ours, via JSON. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And the fact that it's super easy and, well, I'd say super easy, right? But it is easy-ish to be able to get some metrics like that and stuff that's relevant to your organization.
Yeah. All right. So that's all I got for today. I'm gonna have to poke at this cluster in the background after we get off the air, because I'm still I'm very suspect that this thing works. It's a testament to the resiliency of OpenShift and etcd in the control plane. More than anything, right, that it came back up and we're technically re-protected, right, if you will, against node failure. Again, I'm a little suspect of that. And the right thing to do would have been to re-provision the node and make sure that the DHCP and DHCP assigned hostname and IP address came up correctly, which they very much did not in my instance. But yeah, and if you are provisioning it any other way, so I could have assigned from the live ISO environment, I could have done a static IP. That would have worked exactly or just fine. Note though, and I learned this yesterday. So if you do the copy network, so if I boot into that live ISO environment, I set my static IP, I set my host name. If you do the copy network, the host name is not copied across. So you definitely want to make sure that your reverse DNS is in place, because that's where it'll look to get its host name from. And interesting note, if you have ever done a assisted installer install, right? After you download the assisted installer ISO, you boot your nodes, they pop into the interface and it has the host names there. You can rename the host names, right? You can give them a host name. So the way that works is by it uses Ignition to put an etc hostname file in place. So while that works, it's not the official way of assigning host names. So in this instance, that really wouldn't work for replacing our host name, because we can't. I guess you could probably extend the master.ign to add in creating that file, that feels kind of hacky. So really, you want reverse DNS to be the method. You want to do it according to the documentation and all of that other stuff. So while the assisted installer folks do the magic that they do, and that type of stuff works, and it's certainly an option, I felt like doing it this way with DHCP and reverse DNS, even though it didn't work for me, was the more common way of doing that. All right. So, any last minute questions, anything like that?
Yep, we had one come in from Mike. He's asking if we've ever seen any like cluster degradation over time in AWS to resource constraints, essentially like burst limits for CPU. And then he just explaining a little bit further, like he's seen where the clusters are running fine, but then they become degraded over time because of the high resource utilization. So my experience has been, like whenever it happens like that, it's normally because we're not balancing like infrastructure services and application services correctly. And so what we'll do is we'll end up rolling, we'll have customers that just don't want to do infra nodes for the cloud cost or whatever. So they'll eventually kind of move to that cycle, especially when they start putting things like ODF or service mesh, or they just want to put the registry and the router and all that stuff out of their application nodes. Then we'll see it kind of rebalance. But like honestly, I haven't seen anything over like a long period of time that's shown that it'll consistently like hit a resource limit and become degraded. I've not seen that. I don't know about you, Andrew. Have you seen that?
No. Yes and no, right? So yes, but it's usually a result of the cluster getting larger, right? Where especially with control plane nodes, right? I start with four CPUs and 16 gigs of RAM because I think I'm only going to have a few nodes and a few hundred objects, and accidentally I have a few dozen nodes and a few thousand objects, and etcds eating memory like crazy. I've seen that happen, but like memory leak type things or just that type of stuff, it's always been like workload related. Hey, we thought we were only going to have 100 pods. Turns out we've got 230 pods. That type of stuff.
Yeah, and he clarified too, and he said that he has seen it specifically in 4.7. I'm trying to remember. It's been so long. I can't remember there was something big about 4.7 when it came out. I just don't remember what it was. And yeah, I think our customer initially they were on 4.6, and there was something with 4.7 that they kind of held back on. But then I think once they've gotten to 4.7, 20 or whatever it was, after a certain edition, everything was just working fine. So it could be a combination of the Core OS image that you're using and the cluster version. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I would definitely say if you haven't, open a support case, because that is one of those things, especially if you've seen it happen more than once. That sounds like it's something worth investigating. And if support finds an issue, they'll bring it up with engineering, and we can get that fixed. All right. So for anybody who didn't get their question answered, if you're watching this not live, if you're watching the recording, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So you can find me at andrew.sullivan or via email at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com, or on Twitter at practicalandrew, as well as on Reddit and all the various other places. Feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. I'll do my best to answer those questions. If you're watching it on YouTube or one of the others, feel free to leave a comment. I've now finally figured out how to set up the automation so that I can get I get an email when somebody leaves a comment on YouTube, even though it's not my YouTube account. So magic.
Nice.
Yeah. So feel free to do that as well. Johnny, I think your information is what, JRock TX, ROCK TX 1.
Yep, JRock TX 1.
Or Johnny, JONNY at redhat.com. With that being said, again, just a quick reminder, next week we'll be talking with Kirsten Newcomer about security inside of OpenShift. The week after that, we don't know yet, but we'll have something exciting planned for that week as well. So be sure to get subscribed, so that way when we what we choose, what we end up selecting. And if you have any ideas, anything that you'd like to request, any suggestions, anything like that, just feel free to reach out to us too. We'd love to know what's interesting to you all. SDN, yeah.
That was it. Yep.
Yeah, well, both 4.7 and so Rick Rakow there. 4.7 was when we had SDN, and I think it was driver issues, kernel driver issues with the VMX.NET 3 NIC driver. Both in 4.7 and 4.8, sadly. So, All right. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Johnny, thank you as always for helping out and keeping me on track there. If anybody has any questions about anything, again, feel free to reach out to us. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great and stay safe out there. And Johnny, I'll leave you with the last word.
Yep, Stephanie, as always, thank you for everything that you do. You're awesome. And Rick, thanks for all the feedback and help in the stream and all the questions from the crowd. We love it. So keep it up. Talk to you next week.